Missing person cases are constantly being investigated by the police, FBI investigators, and other law enforcement agencies, as mysterious disappearances continue to occur at alarming rates. Many of these scary mysteries have ended tragically, with the missing person either never being found or being located after they've passed away. But in some solved cases, the missing person is found alive, very often against all the odds and expectations of their loved ones. Number 5. In 1941, Chuichi Yakoi was a 41-year-old man working as a tailor in Japan when he was conscripted into the Imperial Japanese Army. He served in China until February of 1943, when he was transferred to serve in Guam. In the summer of the following year, his regiment encountered American forces, and after they suffered heavy losses, he and 10 other soldiers fled into the jungle, as it was considered a terrible fate for a Japanese soldier to be captured. For the next 27 years, Shuichi remained missing, and it was presumed that he had passed away while hiding in the jungle. But his story would take an unexpected twist when 2 fishermen, Jesus Duenas and Manuel Garcia, spotted a man checking his bamboo fishing trap in the Talofofo River. Shuichi immediately charged at the 2 men, but since he wasn't in the best physical shape, they overpowered him easily. They then learned that he hadn't seen another person in years and feared that he would be taken as a prisoner. The men explained that the war had been over for decades, and learned that Shuichi had in fact found flyers years earlier stating that the war was over, but he assumed they were merely American propaganda and decided to stay in the jungle. He had survived in a self-made cave and fed himself by hunting at night. He had also fashioned clothes and bedding out of plants, and miraculously survived for 27 years. He later stated that when he was carried out of the jungle by the 2 fishermen, he thought he would be executed, but to his surprise, he was given hot soup to eat before the authorities arrived. He soon became a media sensation, and after finishing a tour of Japan, he married and settled down. He eventually received back pay equivalent to $300 and also received a small pension. Number 4. In 1970, Truman Everetts, a federal tax assessor from Montana, became a missing person, and by all accounts, he was lucky to escape with his life. Before his disappearance, Everetts had joined an expedition led by Henry Washburn and Nathaniel Langford, and their aim was to explore the wilderness in an area that is now known as the Yellowstone National Park. On September 9th, Everetts started to fall behind the rest of the expedition, and soon he lost his pack horse that was carrying most of his vital supplies. Realizing that he now had no food or survival equipment, he did his best to track the expedition, but he was unsuccessful. He lived on the roots of thistle plants and attempted to help himself keep warm during snowstorms while fully aware that he was vulnerable to wild animal attacks. In the meantime, the expedition built large fires and fired their weapons into the air, hoping that Everetts would hear them, but to no avail. They had all agreed that if a member of their party got lost, they would meet up again at the southwest arm of the lake, but Everetts never arrived, and it was thought that he'd fallen victim to the elements. That is, until the 16th of October, 37 days after he had gotten lost. 2 men, Jack Baronet and George Pritchett, who were part of a group that was looking for Everetts' remains, found him in the woods. He was suffering from frostbite and had been scalded by thermal vents in the area and weighed a mere 50 pounds. He was mumbling incoherently and wandered more than 50 miles off course. One of the men stayed with him while the other hiked 75 miles to find help. He was then taken to Bozeman, where he made a full recovery. Everetts would go on to recount his experience in an article entitled 37 Days of Peril that was published in an illustrated magazine called Scribner's Monthly. Pritchett and Baronet were eligible for a reward, but Everetts refused to pay it, claiming that he would eventually have made it out of the woods on his own. A peak near Mammoth Hot Springs was named Mount Everetts, and the plant that he sustained himself on was named Everett's Thistle, ensuring that this legend would live on for many years to come. Number 3. In December of 2013, Lauren Garrett, from Shoreline in Washington, had been couch surfing and living under an overpass on the I-5. She decided to move into her father's house, but 5 months later, she would become the subject of a missing person case. On the 1st of May, 2014, Lauren had completed a 60-day rehabilitation program in Sedro-Woolley, and she was on her way home from Port Townsend, where she had spent the previous day. At 7:47 p.m., she made a call to her father from a borrowed cell phone and asked if he could come get her, but he told her to take a bus instead. Lauren was then seen shortly after, leaving 2 duffel bags in a wooded area near Haynes Palace Park and Ride. She walked to a Safeway in Port Townsend, where she bought alcohol and soda. She also tried to cash a $55.50 check, but didn't have identification with her. She was then supposed to board a bus to her father's house, but she never arrived and she was reported missing. On the 7th of May, her mother found one of her duffel bags next to a homeless man who stated that he was waiting for the owner of the bag to return. Searches were conducted in Port Townsend and Shoreline, but she couldn't be located. Then on the 3rd of June, a woman resembling Lauren attempted to return merchandise at a Fred Meyer store in Shoreline, but she only had another woman's ID with her, and she left, leaving the merchandise and ID behind. Her father was asked to review CCTV security footage from the store, and he was able to verify that it had indeed been Lauren who was in the store. They noted that she was alone at the time and didn't seem to be in any form of distress. Since she had been seen and didn't appear to be in any danger, it was decided that the investigation into her disappearance should be called off, and the case was closed, as she's thought to have left the area of her own free will. Number 2. In April of 2011, Amber Gerwick had just moved into her apartment in Jackson, Michigan, after divorcing her husband in 2006. On the 9th of April, she phoned her mother, Jackie, as she was in the habit to do since they lived far apart, with her mother living in Georgia. She said that she would be spending the day studying, but 2 days later, her Aunt Diane phoned Jackie and informed her that she'd been unable to contact Amber. She hadn't been to work for 2 days, and they knew it was very out of character for her and decided to report her as a missing person. Investigators went to her apartment and found no signs of forced entry or a struggle, though they did notice that her purse was left on the kitchen counter, but her keys and wallet were missing. Her cell phone was found lying on her bed, along with her computers and study material. Since her car was also gone, it was entered into the missing persons database along with her other information, and almost immediately, a detective from Georgia called to report that her car had been found abandoned in the parking lot of a Dollar General store in Tunnel Hill. There was, however, no sign of Amber, and her family was confused as to why her car would be found 35 miles from their house. In the car, they found a receipt from the store, and when surveillance footage was checked, they confirmed that she had been in the store by herself. Her family was concerned that since she worked for a company that was contracted by Homeland Security, her mysterious disappearance may have had something to do with her job. Searches were conducted of the swampland and remote areas in Georgia, but nothing was found. On the 4th of May, investigators informed Amber's family that they had no further leads, but on that same day, they received a call from the Joliet Police Department informing them that they'd found a woman wandering in a city park. She'd been taken to a hospital where she was registered as Jane Doe. They had released the woman's photo, hoping that she would be recognized, and soon enough, they received information that the woman was Amber. It would come to light that Amber had suffered an episode of transient global amnesia, and the last thing she remembers is walking through the aisles of the Dollar General store. To this day, she has almost no memory of the time that she went missing. Number 1. On the 15th of December, 2008, Magdalene McCullough had been getting into her car at Edinburgh Royal Infirmary before she mysteriously vanished. Magdalene, who was originally from South Africa, was working at the hospital's cardiology unit, and her next shift was supposed to be on the 18th of December. But she never arrived at work, which was seen as highly unusual and out of character. Investigators traveled to her house in West Lothian, Scotland, and found that her work bag containing her packed lunch and uniform was still there. Her bank cards and passport were also located in the house, but her car was gone, and immediately, concerns grew for her safety. A search was conducted in the area, but with no results, and Magdalene remained a missing person. A few days later, her car was seen by traffic officers driving on the M8, and on the 26th of December, it was found parked on a quiet road in Airdrie. Upon discovery of the vehicle, investigators conducted a search, and to their surprise, found Magdalene locked in the trunk. She was transported to Monkland's Hospital, where she received treatment and made a full recovery. When questioned about what had happened, she told investigators that Justice Nagima, an illegal immigrant, also from South Africa, who had used his brother's passport to gain entry to the country, was responsible for her disappearance. Nagima was introduced to Magdalene before, as they were fellow countrymen, and on that day, he asked her if he could enter her house as he was cold and hungry. Once inside, he produced a weapon and forced her to reveal her PIN numbers. He then took Magdalene's bank cards after tying her up and placing her in the car's trunk, then went on a Christmas shopping spree. Magdalene stated that as he drove around, she had no idea where they were, and she was reminded of the many missing people who have never been found. He eventually decided to leave the car at a station in Airdrie, where Magdalene remained in the trunk for the next 10 days. She was severely dehydrated and suffering from hypothermia, as well as frostbite. Nagima was ultimately tracked down and charged with abduction, fraud, and theft, to which he pleaded guilty. He was ultimately handed a sentence of 8 years behind bars. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.